Hi everyone, and welcome to part 2 of this week's crime and punishment story, which is the case of Martin Moffat and the murder of Sarah Gibson, which took place in Sunderland in 1883. I am not going to do a recap of the story so far, as the first part was only published this morning, so I hope that you can still remember what's happened up to now. Or perhaps, like I said at the end of part 1, maybe you have waited and you are watching both parts together. Anyway, I hope you will find the end of the story interesting. As always though, I do record these stories live, so I do sometimes make mistakes, which I always do try to rectify, so I hope this does not spoil your enjoyment of the video. And I had to include that at the start because obviously I do often make mistakes. So we rejoin the story at the inquest with the next witness about to give evidence. Mary Naylor said Sarah was her mother and she had visited her at her home in Sunderland on the Tuesday after the attack. She said her mother was complaining of pains in her side and was in bed at the time. She had gone back again on the Thursday, and after this she had stayed with her until she had died. She said she had seen Martin Moffat and she had asked him what he was going to do about her mother. She said she told him, "You have done for her at last," and he had replied, "What have I done?" She said she told him to come and see. He said he was going to do some business and would come round to their house later. He asked her how it had happened and she said she was not there. He would know better as he was there at the time. She said he then asked her if her mother had any broken ribs and she said she thought 2. He then said how were they done and she told him her mother had said by kicks. However, she said that Martin never did come back to visit them after the first time when he had told them to get the doctor. Henry Cleverin said he lived in the same street in Sunderland as the Gibsons. He said on the night of the 19th he heard Adam in the street at around 11:20 p.m. He was shouting "Murder, police" at the top of his voice. He said his voice sounded clear and he did not sound drunk to him. He said he saw Mrs. Smith go out and he saw her return around 15 minutes later with a policeman. He said he saw the policeman shine a light on Sarah and he noticed the blood on her face. He also saw Adam go inside before the policeman arrived. PC Dykstra went inside and a few minutes later came out with Martin. He did not think Martin was wearing his hat at the time. He then saw the policeman help Sarah into the house and a few minutes after this he went away. When asked about the time, he said he was sure it was near to 12 midnight and not 1 a.m. He was sure that his clock was right. His evidence then seemed to get a little confused, at times saying it was actually 1 a.m., then saying he meant to say 12 and not 1 a.m. He was asked by the coroner if he had been drinking that night and said he had not. He said he was sure that PC Dykstra was not in the house long enough to have been able to pick Adam up from the floor before coming back down for Sarah. He was only inside around 2 or 3 minutes. Dr. Dale said he had gone to the home of the Gibsons on Sunday, April the 24th. Sarah was lying on a bed and her ribs were bandaged, and there was nothing that he could do for her as he believed she was already dying. He examined her and found bruising to her face, hands and body, and she was suffering from inflammation of the lungs. She had died a short time after he had seen her. He said along with Dr. Watson he had performed the post-mortem on the body of Sarah Gibson. He said he found her to have 4 broken ribs, 2 of which had pushed inwards and caused bleeding to the lungs. He said the cause of death was pneumonia. He stated that in his opinion all of the injuries had been inflicted at the same time, and although he did not think a fall down the stairs would have been enough to cause all of these injuries, they could have caused some of them. Dr. Watson gave the same evidence as Dr. Dale, adding that it was possible the injuries would have been caused more by pressure on the body than by kicks, but whatever it was, great violence had been used. The coroner spoke to the jury, saying it was for them to decide if they felt the injuries that had caused the death of Sarah Gibson had been caused by Martin Moffat, and if they thought this was the cause, then they must decide if they felt it was murder or manslaughter. The jury, after retiring for only 5 minutes, returned a verdict of guilty of manslaughter, and Martin Moffat was committed for trial. A magistrate's hearing was held after the inquest, and at this hearing a witness was called by the name of John McGorrell, who said he also lived in the same buildings as the Gibsons, and he had been at home on the night of the 19th. He said he had gone to bed at around 10 p.m. and had first been awoken at around 11:15 by a sound outside on the stairs. He opened his window and looked outside and saw Adam Gibson fall out into the street drunk, and he then lay on the ground, and he was there for at least half an hour. He said Sarah came down the stairs after him and she fell over him at the bottom, and he heard her tell Adam, "You have very nearly killed me." He said they were both very drunk. He looked out for a few moments more and heard Adam shouting, but he was so drunk that he could not make out what he was saying. He said it was not long after this that the policeman arrived, and later at around 1 a.m. he saw Martin Moffat leave, and the policeman left soon after. He said he had not been asked to give evidence at the inquest, but he had been told that his evidence was important, which was why he was here at the magistrate's hearing. However, his evidence did not make any difference, and Martin was still committed for trial. His defence asked for bail, but first it was said that if he was allowed bail, this would mean his trial would not be heard until July, whereas without bail it would be heard in a few weeks' time. And secondly, it was said he would need over £400 of his own money to cover the bail, which he could not afford. I did not find any evidence of a funeral for Sarah Gibson. It seems to be clear from the fact that the family were not able to pay their rent that the cost of a funeral would also have been beyond their means, so this was most likely a pauper's funeral. I did not find any evidence of a headstone for Sarah anywhere in the area. The trial took place in Durham in April of 1863. The judge on this occasion is not named. Martin Moffat pleaded not guilty to the charge. As is often the case, the majority of the evidence given at the trial is the same as that at the inquest, so I will only include any new information. When asked, Adam Gibson said he was sure it was between 12 and 1 a.m. when he had gone to look for his son to bring him to the house to see his mother. Yet it must be worth remembering that his son had said it was 1:30 a.m. when his father came to find him. He also said he usually worked as a joiner for Martin, but had not worked for him lately, and he knew Martin had taken on another man to do the job. He said he did not really drink, and Martin had certainly never complained about his drinking, and he said his wife also did not drink, apart from some spirits now and then. He said he had never asked for Martin to send food and wine to his house when Sarah had been ill in bed, and had definitely not said if he did not send these things, he would make things bad for him. He said he had been married over 40 years to Sarah, and they were a happy couple. They did not argue. He was sure that no one had fallen down the stairs on the night in question, and no one could have heard an argument later than 12 midnight, because there was not one happened. P.C. Dykstra was asked why he had not made a note of the case as he would have usually been expected to do so, and he stated it was because Sarah did not make any real complaints about anything other than her face. She did not mention a pain in her side, and he did not feel the case was a serious one. He was asked if he was sure of the times, and he said yes, he had a very good watch that was never wrong. Dr. Beattie was called, and he stated he had first seen Sarah on the Tuesday night. She had dried blood on her face and several bruises. She complained of a pain in her side, and he believed that her ribs were broken, so he had bandaged them. He had seen her again the next day and a final time on the Friday. By then, the inflammation of the lungs had begun. He believed when he had first seen her that she had been drinking heavily for quite some time, and he also stated that Adam Gibson seems to have been drinking heavily for some time as well, but this, he said, was just his opinion. Martin Moffat did not give evidence on his own behalf. The prosecution then spoke to the jury, saying it was his opinion that he had proven the case, that Sarah Gibson had met her death at the hands of Martin Moffat. Yes, there were some discrepancies in the evidence of the witnesses, but this was only to be expected. The defence also spoke to the jury, however, no details were printed in any of the news articles that I found, so we can only assume that he would have suggested that there was no real proof to show that Martin had attacked and kicked Sarah, as the only witness to the attack was Adam Gibson, and he was, as suggested by many, very drunk at the time, so his evidence was not credible. The only other thing that had been noted was the time difference between Adam and PC Dykstra. It was stated that if the policeman was to be believed, and he was seen as a more credible witness, then there was a missing hour where anything could have happened to Sarah that had not been caused by Martin attacking her. The judge addressed the jury, stating that they must consider if they were satisfied that the evidence given was enough to prove to them that Martin Moffat had been responsible for the death of Sarah Gibson. If they felt this had been a deliberate attack, then it would be a case of murder. However, if they felt it had been an accident, with Martin being too drunk to know what he was doing, then it would be a case of manslaughter. The jury retired for 35 minutes before returning a verdict of guilty of manslaughter against Martin Moffat, and the sentence was to be given the following day. At the hearing for the sentencing of Martin Moffat, he asked to speak to the judge and was allowed to do so. It must be said that he made an incredibly long statement. However, I have not added it all, just including the main parts. And Martin said, "I stand before you an innocent man. I was unable to get the witnesses needed to testify at the trial who would have told the jury how drunk Adam Gibson was on the night in question, and how he would have not remembered what had happened that night. He had previously worked for me, but I had to let him go as he was not doing the job properly. I had often helped the family with food when they had none, and I had gone to his home on the night of the 19th to offer him work again. I have many times helped the family with money and have always been good to them, and this is how they repay me, accusing me of a crime I did not commit. And the family came to me many times when Sarah was ill, asking me what I was going to give them, and they all said there would be trouble if I did not give them the things they wanted. I said I would give them nothing but the charity that I had given them by paying for a doctor." He also added that having been in custody for 4 weeks, his business was failing, as he had no one to look after it for him. Most of his children, he said, were girls, and neither they nor his wife were able to take care of the business. He asked the judge to be lenient with him, again stating that he was not guilty of the crime he had been charged with. The judge then spoke to him, saying that the jury had found him guilty, and in his opinion this was the correct verdict. He said that he had been given every opportunity to produce witnesses but had not done so, and that he had also never given any evidence as to what he believed had happened on the night in question. And the judge continued, saying it was possible that Adam Gibson may have been a lot more drunk that night, but he believed the evidence of PC Dykstra, who said Martin had also been very drunk, and that was why his version of events had not been told, as he did not wish to admit what he had done while in a drunken state. He then sentenced Martin Moffat to 15 months penal servitude with hard labour. I did not find any further details of what happened to Martin and his properties after this date. This was a very confusing case. At no point in time did anyone really seem to agree with their evidence. I believe that Adam Gibson was very drunk on the night in question and really didn't know what time anything had happened. Whether he fell down the stairs or whether his wife did is hard to say, as the evidence there is confusing at best. And both of his sons also seem to want to discredit any witness who said Sarah did not seem to be as ill as they claimed she was the day after the alleged attack. Did Martin attack and kick Sarah? Again, this is hard to say for sure. It is possible that he did, as he also seems to have been too drunk at the time to remember what actually happened. But it seems he was definitely seen throwing furniture down the stairs, so if he did that, then it is possible that he attacked Sarah as well. I also think that more must have been said at the Gibsons' home on the night when Martin came to visit. There seems to be no real reason for the fight between Adam and Martin, and even less reason for Martin to attack Sarah. So did Adam say something to Martin that upset him? And if both men were drunk at the time, then it is an easy assumption to make that words had been spoken between the two of them to cause the fight to take place. However, no one suggested that, and as already said, it seems no one really knew for sure what had happened. And did Sarah or Adam fall down the stairs? It is suggested that both had by different people, and if Sarah had, then it is possible she got some of her injuries from the fall, but again, there's no definite proof either way. There also seemed to be a lot made of whether or not Martin had his hat on when he left. Although if this was done to prove that Adam was too drunk to know what had happened, it didn't really work, as other witnesses varied on that subject too. I think the jury had a really hard job deciding who to believe, and I am still not really sure how they came to their verdict, only that they too maybe believed that Martin did attack Sarah, but was just too drunk to remember having done so. And in the end, I think Martin was really lucky that the judge only sentenced him to 15 months in prison, as many before him had been given 10 to 15 years for manslaughter. But what do you think? Do you think that Martin did attack Sarah but was too drunk to remember? Do you think it is possible that Sarah then fell down the stairs and made her injuries worse? Do you think that the difference in time given by Adam and PC Dykstra was just down to the fact that Adam was drunk and had no idea what time anything had happened? Do you think the jury was correct to find Martin guilty of manslaughter? And do you think 15 months was a long enough sentence for the crime, if indeed he was guilty? Do please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I do hope that you have found this very strange, confusing, but also sad and tragic story interesting. And I think you can see from how long each video has lasted why I decided to do this as 2 parts, as I do not really think that I could have talked continuously for such a long time, despite what my friends and family might think. Anyway, I do thank you all very much for watching, and if you have enjoyed part 2 as well as part 1, then please do give it a thumbs up, and do please feel free to subscribe to the channel to help support the content we create. Thank you, because it really is appreciated and it really does help to support the channel. Anyway, I do hope to see you all again very soon.